forth a ray of your brightness into the darkened places of our minds, and disperse from our souls the twofold darknesses into which we were born, sin and ignorance. You make eloquent the tongues of infants, refine our speech, and pour forth upon our lips the goodness of your blessing. Grant to us keenness of mind, capacity to remember, skill in learning, subtlety to interpret, and eloquence in speech. May you guide the beginning of our work, direct its progress, and bring it to completion. You who are true God and true man, who live and reign, world without end. Amen. Amen.
This part I remove.
So last time I think we did something about Matthew.
I don't know how much you got it. And I'm going to just I already told there was a geographical division. We have already seen from there is a Galilean ministry, then there is a Judean ministry, then there is the end of in Jerusalem. So that's could be seen Jesus' life, public life, as a journey from Galilee to Jerusalem through Judea. So most of his ministry is done in Galilee. Then on the way, of course, there is another section, and then the end section, the passion, death and resurrection, and the last commission of those things. But much more a deeper study, we have already seen 5 discourses, or 5 units, something. So we shall concentrate little more about it, because then it will be easier. Then if you get a little bit of that, I think it will be very easy, to take the gospel as a whole thing. Okay, so I have already, before that, we have seen who was the author of gospel. I just recalling, the last class. The author is, traditionally believed to be the apostle Matthew, but a further deeper studies reveal, of course, most of the scholars say now, could be a Jewish Christian. One thing is very clear: someone who is related and who knows very well the Jewish tradition. Then who is the audience? It is a Jewish community, Jewish Christian community. If the audience is not a community familiar with Judaism, and they won't understand much of the things what is written in Matthew. So they have to be very consistent in that the audience is a Jewish related community. Most probably it's a community converted to Christianity from Judaism. So they are all familiar with all the laws, all the traditions of Jewish religion, and therefore it was very easy for him, because the whole gospel runs through a very interesting theme. The author very clearly tries to establish that Jesus is the promised Messiah. To a pagan community, that won't be a understandable thing, no? If it is not a Jewish community, who would be the promised Messiah? Nothing, no? So, he, from the very beginning, that's why from the very beginning till the end of the gospel, there is a thread going on, that is, Jesus is the promised Messiah, and his teaching about it, all those things we shall see something about more in depth today, and that very clearly connects the gospel to the Jewish audience. So that is the preliminary remark, or last time we did, and then we went a little bit to the division of the gospel into the 5 units. Okay, we shall take once again the 5 major discourse. Okay, please note the 5 the most important section of the Bible of Gospel of Matthew forms these 5 discourses. It is interesting to note that, for example, the first discourse comes from chapters 5 to 7. We are all familiar with that, no? Chapter 5, we are all familiar. Chapter 5 is very, very famous. The Sermon on the Mount. The Beatitudes comes there, no? So these 5, 6, 7 chapters, that is 3 chapters, the first unit. And each unit, before that, what is the structure of that unit? The structure of the unit, is mostly, we can see, there is the narrative part. Narrative part. Then the discourse. Then there is a summary statement. Summary means, this is very interesting. This summary is always stated like that: Jesus having finished these things. Okay? That forms, for example, there is a narrative part, then there is the discourse, then after that there is a statement when Jesus finished these things. Invariably, in all these 5 sections we see this structure. Okay, let us take chapters 5 to 7. So this is the first discourse. So now there is a first section. This is the discourse. Okay, discourse means teachings. Okay, teachings. Then there is a preliminary section, that is a narrative section. Here it comes. This is the discourse section. Okay, discourse. There is the narrative section, that is chapter 3 and 4. And then there is the summary statement. Summary. Okay, let us take chapter 7, 27. Chapter 7. Chapter 7, 27. Can anyone read that?
Chapter 7 what?
7, 27. That is the last word. No?
7 what?
7, 27.
The
That
rain
it-
poured down, the river flooded over, the wind blew hard against that house, and it fell.
Yeah. Comes 28 is the summary statement. Look, when 28. 28.
And when Jesus finished these sayings, the crowds were astonished.
Yes. When Jesus finished, that is the summary statement, is the chapter 7, 28. Look.
Is it safe to say that the narrative and the summaries tend to be much shorter than the teaching? They're almost like a line or something like that.
Yes, very simple. So, this is chapter 3 and 4 are the narratives. Let us take chapter. So this is the first unit. Last time we have seen that the gospel could be divided into 5 units, no? 5 units. So center of the 5 unit, each unit is the discourse part. So the first unit forms chapter 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. No? 3 to 7. Did you remember that? I don't know whether you have written something like that. The first unit, of the gospel, first unit, chapter 7 through chapter 3 to 7. Okay? That is the first unit. And of which the 3 and 4 is the narrative part. So let us see something. That's why today I asked, especially to bring Bible. So without Bible, just seeing it, it will be just in the air. So 3 and 4. These are mainly, look at, take the mainly, what are the, just to see only the headings. For example, the preaching of John the Baptist. So what happened about John the Baptist? No? Then comes the baptism of Jesus, a narrative. Then there is the temptation of Jesus in the chapter 4. Then Jesus begins his work in Galilee. What happened in the Capernaum, no? In that synagogue. He says, things like that. Then Jesus calls the fishermen as his disciples. Then Jesus teaches, preaches, and heals. So the 3 and 4 chapters form a narrative. What took place? Then comes the core of the first unit, that is the discourse. So chapter 5, 6 and 7. Look, mainly chapter 5, it's a sermon on the mount, no? Sermon on the Beatitudes. Then the teaching on salt and earth. You are the salt of the earth, and you are the light of the world. Salt and the light. Then teaching about the law. Then there is teaching about anger. Teaching about adultery. Teaching about divorce. Teaching about vows. Teaching about revenge. And teaching about love for enemies. Then teaching about charity, chapter 6. Teaching about prayer. Teaching about fasting. And then teaching about the riches. Then about the body. Then about God and possessions. Then 7. Judging others. How to judge, what would be happening. Ask and say about prayer. And then you see teaching about the narrow gate. See, it's a compact teaching for mostly, understand. So one thing you have to understand, you just to remember, what we took in the first classes about the formation of the gospel. Don't think that Jesus came, one day came to Mount, the Beatitude Mount, and then began to teach all these at once. No. This was a part. Do you remember those things? People began to, when after Jesus preaching, then people began to began preaching again about life of Jesus and his teaching and things like that. People began to write in different contexts, no? Different contexts. Some people who were missionaries, they insisted more on the missionary aspect of Jesus. Some were teaching even the catechism, more deeper faith for the Christians. They concentrated more on the teaching of Jesus. And that is here we see very clearly. The whole 3 years of life of Jesus, teachings, most of the teachings we come here. So don't think he came, and sat down on a rock and began to teach whatever, he came, all these 3 chapters.
I was just, taking that and going back and looking at the words literally, and it's interesting. Before chapter 5 says, his fame spread throughout all of Syria, and they brought him all the sick and afflicted, various diseases, and he healed them. And great crowds followed him from Galilee to Decapolis to Jerusalem and Judea and from beyond Jordan. Seeing the crowds, for the first time I'm really seeing different crowds at different times and places. He went up to the mountain, he sat down and opened his mouth and taught them, saying. So this,
very clear.
So it's not one, this is a compilation
of different, occasions, different teachings. Yeah. It was not this is all kind of, it could be, it's a kind of, almost a kind of a summary of the teaching of the 3 years.
Yeah, because I always read it as seeing the crowd, but it says seeing the crowds, but the paragraph before talks about multiple crowds in multiple places.
And not only that, this gospel says his, fame was spread out all throughout the places. That means he was already famous.
Yeah, okay.
So when he was writing, in his mind he was already famous.
And he was summarizing.
Yeah, and he was summarizing all the teachings almost. So remember, this is very important, If you, go for something to find about the teaching of Jesus, go for chapter 5, 6, 7. It's very, very easy to remember, no? Chapters 5, 6, 7. All these things constitute mainly the teachings of Jesus about love, about enemies, about judgment, about adultery, about riches, what all things. Beatitudes, chapter 5, starting. One thing in between, I would insist on, when these people wrote originally the Bible, the Gospel, it had no chapters, it had no verses. You know that. So when we say chapter 5, sometimes, it comes, overlapping. So the one who wrote had no idea about chapters and verses. That was superimposed for practical reasons later. And that was in the, I think, last time did anyone bring the last time's notes? If some, yeah, you have what I gave? I think there, just a moment, Just, I think, the last time I gave something about who wrote about, for example, Cardinal Stephen Langton in 1205 created the chapter divisions which are today in 1205.
Cardinal what?
Langton. Stephen Langton.
So 1,000 years later.
Yes.
Over 1,000 years later.
So 1205. Where?
Can you spell his name?
Stephen Langton. Stephen, you already no?
I went to that far.
Our first martyr.
Langton.
He was
Yeah.
a cardinal.
Cardinal.
We got another Catholic.
Well, because that time there was no Protestantism. Protestantism started only 14.
And some of the chapter divisions are almost a little
Unnatural,
yeah,
sometimes.
Like this paragraph before chapter 5 finishes the narrative and
Yeah.
transitions to the discourse.
Yeah, that's why, That's why, just to say, in the mind of the writer, it had no chapter divisions and things like that. Therefore, when we go to see the divisions, there could be an overlapping and things like that, need not follow exactly as chapters. Okay? Then, the verses of the Bible, the verses. So, this Robert Etienne, was the first one to number the verses.
So who was, Father? Say it again.
That is Robert Etienne. It is called Robert. So the spelling it is. I have taken it from from I think from the website somewhere. It is his. This is the name. That is Robert. Already know. Then in 1551, already a Protestant. So, in 1551, Robert Etienne, this is S. Yes. Robert, it is, the word, the name is, the name appears. But I think he's a Frenchman who owned a printing machine. By the time already Gutenberg, discovered printing press. And he owned a printing press. And he began to print Bible. So, and he used in 1551, numbering the verses. After, 300 years after division of the chapter. And the Bible gets only the verses only after 1,500 years.
Was he Protestant?
He was a Protestant.
Darn.
No. Hey, Sylvia. First thing we have to appreciate that the Bible studies were the studies were promoted by the Protestants.
Yeah.
Sure, we have to appreciate that.
Yes.
The Bible studies, so much Bible studies have been done by the Protestants, and the Catholics are far behind. That is, without any doubt, anybody can affirm that.
True today too, right?
Even today.
Hey guys, we gotta catch up. Way behind.
Well, I got when I was in the process of converting to the Catholic Church, I got into a conversation between a Catholic and an evangelical, and for the first time I really found myself truly the man in the middle. And one of the things that occurred to me is the Protestant movement started after the invention of the printing press.
Yes.
Right.
It was much easier to encourage the congregations to read the Bible because it became cheaper and easier to produce them. In the prior 15 centuries before the Protestant movement did not have to contend with 15 centuries of cultural implosion by the collapse of the Roman Empire, the Dark Ages, the Great Plagues of Europe, and that left isolated and totally illiterate populations.
And,
So things changed by the 1500s.
Clear, very clear. And some people say the Protestantism is the product of printing.
How interesting, huh?
Yes.
That is interesting.
That is, the Protestantism is a product of the printing.
It's said that Martin Luther's discourses that he nailed on the door may have disintegrated and withered away had it not been for the printing press.
Because at that time, by the time the printing was discovered, and it began to spread, and people began to catch up with the free thinking more. Before that, only the thinking process was done on what the clergyman taught them in the church. What the clergyman, preached in the gospel, in the church. They said, this is our faith. Believe it. People believed. And there was no chance, there was no opportunity for a free thinking. And it all came together. For example, not only this one, and it was the time of Renaissance, no? The Renaissance.
The Renaissance in Northern Europe came up almost a century, we're about 50, 75 years behind Italy.
Yeah, but they started all together. So free thinking, rationalization. So, and you see, the Protestantism is almost like a kind of rationalization when we think about more about Bible and things like that. So this is in between. I just told the date and.
If I could throw in just one little tidbit too, is because of that, the printing press and the push to get the congregations to read the Bible. This is one of the reasons why, at the time of the American Revolution, the 13 colonies in America had one of the most literate populations in the world.
And that came from Scotland, believe it or not.
Father, I've got a question about the author of Matthew.
Yeah.
Did he write this gospel, sat down and wrote it all in one time, or was it over a lifetime?
I told you before that there was a process behind, of course. Mark, the author, not Mark, Matthew, of course, there were resources before him. It doesn't come from his mind alone, no. What was the process we already referred before? It was, for example, Jesus preaching first in a oral way, no? Jesus preached the oral way. And then that was taken by the disciples, and they began to repeat what Jesus taught, and they began to say what was the life of Jesus. And that took almost like 30 years. In between, people began to, I told you, different occasions, different contexts. There were missionary context, there was the catechetical context, and there was the liturgical context. In which, people came after the Old Testament reading that we follow in our liturgy, We first, use the Old Testament reading. Then there is the reading from the Apostle Paul or letters, then the Gospel. So they were following, the synagogue worship, where whatever the main activity was, open the Torah, read it, and interpret it. So they took it in Christian worship. They considered Bible as the Word of God, the Old Testament as the Word of God, and they read it and interpreted, of course, and at the end they read it, and then after that their own, what will they call it, is remembrance, anamnesis, they say, about the life of Jesus and teachings by heart, oral tradition. There was nothing before them. So somebody began to say, for example, mostly when there was a presence of an apostle, so he will begin to say what he saw and heard about Jesus and his teachings, that we call, and then follow the celebration of the Eucharist as we see in chapter, Acts of the Apostles and things like that. So that was the first thing, was a transmission of the teaching and the life and teaching of Jesus through oral tradition. And people begin to realize at once that it's going to be a difficult thing, because after a generation, much more things could be added, many more things could be forgotten. So some people began to write it in small portions, what they interested more. In the liturgical context, people who were doing that, they wrote about there. Who were preaching, they wrote what is important for them, and catechetics, so that they wrote what is interesting and important for them. And that was the second phase of the formation of the gospel, oral tradition and writings. And the third phase is the redaction, where the author takes all these given documents. People wrote here and there, not only one, there were many. So, took whatever. That's why, and last time we explained Matthew, according to the synoptic problem, what we explained last time, Matthew took Mark as the foundation for Matthew. No? Matthew follows, the Gospel of Matthew follows the structure of Mark. So, now the scholars say Mark forms the foundation for the Matthew and Luke. And that's why the first three Gospels are called synoptic Gospels, because they follow the same pattern, the same structure, the same sequence of events. While when we see, very interesting that compared to with these three Gospels to John, some of the things are different, narrated. For example, the John's Gospel, the first list, see, the first thing, it is the changing of the wine, no? At Cana, no? That is the John's Gospel, first miracle. Wedding at Cana, no? And then comes the second miracle in John is raising the what's called the son of the centurion from the dead. No? The first one, the first miracle of John is turning wine, the water into wine. That is at the miracle at Cana, no? The second miracle is the rising the centurion's son. Chapter 4. That is the second miracle. That means, chronologically seeing, the centurion's son's, that miracle comes first, no? In the chronological order of John. But when we see that in Luke and Mark, see, Luke, it comes 7, chapter 7. So, later, in the chronological order, the Gospel of Luke, puts that event in a later period of Jesus' life. Say, am I confusing you?
No.
Okay, because what I am saying this is why? Because, see, not simply, the synoptics follow one pattern of structure, and John follows an entirely different pattern of structure.
Yeah, he was preaching to
The Greek community, and not only that, he has a different structure, a different style, of course. His audience was different, his style is different, and he follows a totally different structure. Here, for example, in the, as I told you, in the Synoptic Gospels, what we see, Jesus starting his ministry from Galilee, and it is a march towards Jerusalem, where he ends up his life. While John's, he goes straightly to Jerusalem. He starts there. So his theology, his idea is entirely different. Entirely different. So that we will see later. So what we want to say is, mostly, see, look at, I was, answering this question. Already we have discussed it, we just, so note that author of Matthew, he did not simply produce from nothing this gospel, but he was basing his gospel on first on Mark. Then last time I said there was a common source for that's called Q, no? Quelle, source. And there was another one, special to Matthew. So there were at least three resources he used. There was the Mark Gospel as a what's called as a basic thing, to which he had the three synoptics used other source which they call it qui, no? And then from another thing, there is something special resources for Matthew, because some things are only we see in Matthew, not other gospels. So we are going to see that. So these are the three things: Mark, Q, and Matthew proper. These are the three resources he used to produce the gospel. Okay? Not simply something came out from his mind alone. No, he used the resources and he redacted it. That is very something I'm asking a question. So we just finished Christmas celebration, no? But all the things what we see in the nativity scene, which are the things and persons we see in the manger, or when we make a crib, but all the things the traditional things what we see in the manger.
Family, the shepherds, and the king.
Okay, the Holy Family, Mary, Jesus, and Joseph. Then the shepherds, the wise men. That's the wise men and kings the same. The angels, the animals, the star. At least these things are there, no? Let us take Matthew. Okay, let us take Matthew. Chapter 1 is genealogy, no? Chapter 1 is genealogy. Who is who? That was the here again, just I want to make an important about genealogy. When he speaks about genealogy, he goes up to Abraham. Jesus' connection with Abraham. Why Matthew finished with Abraham while Luke goes further to Adam? Why Gospel of Matthew finishes with Abraham? Who can answer? It's very clear. Yeah.
Because the Israelites, the Jews, have their
beginning. No, because he wanted to show Jesus is the promised Messiah from the fulfillment of the promise for the Jews. And the Jews starts their existence from Abraham. So he connects with Abraham. His interest was that. So, the beginning of the Jewish religion is from Abraham now. He is called the father of the faith. It is through the covenant with Abraham that started the new, the religion or anything. And from there starts the existence for them. And therefore, he is connected with the first one. Jesus is connected with the first one.
I had a Jewish friend of mine argue that, but Joseph wasn't really Jesus' father, so Jesus couldn't claim to be from the line of the...
And interesting, this is very interesting to note, no? Jesus really doesn't belong, what's called geologically, no? Biologically, Jesus doesn't belong to the line of Abraham. But Matthew imposes it, connects it. No? That is very interesting to see. For example, let us take the nativity scene together now. See the birth of Jesus Christ. whatever we see, what you said, all these things are not in the nativity scene. What we see in the Gospel of John, there are only, the Holy Family and the visitors or the kings, nothing else. No shepherds, no angels, no ass and oxes, nothing. See, look the Bible. The birth of Jesus Christ. And in Matthew, you can very clearly see what Glenn was talking. The role of Mary is very minimal. Look, it's very minimal. But Joseph is the one who is the prominent in Matthew's Gospel. Look into.
He's like a patriarch.
Because it is the Annunciation. We don't see Annunciation to Mary. We don't see that in Gospel of Matthew. But Annunciation is done to Joseph, no? Angel comes and speaks about, the birth of Jesus, and don't doubt Mary and things like that. He was having, the doubt about why the Mary is pregnant, right? What is the problem is going on? And in the Gospel of Matthew, the Annunciation is done. The revelation from God is to Joseph. And Joseph is the one who is related to Abraham. Not Mary. So Matthew was interested more in that. See, for example, chapter 1, 18. This is how the birth of Jesus Christ took place. No? Mother of Mary was engaged to Joseph. And that is the only when, just mentioned mother of Mary. That's mother of, his mother Mary was engaged. And all other times, the prominent personality in Matthew is Joseph. Look, then she was found, Joseph was a man who did not, he was a right man, a just, and things happening, and now this happened. And, so Joseph woke up and, married Mary, took Mary and things like that. Then he had no sexual, this is what's called, the Good News translation, but Catholic edition. Some of things are, not traditionally as it is, but, I can understand. Then she gave birth to her son. No description of, going to Bethlehem, to manger, to shepherds coming, and all those things. No. Here what we see is the visitors and the star. And we all know, at least from tradition, we all know now we have the names, even for these visitors, 3. We say there were 3 kings, or we call it Magi, Nobody says there are 3 in the Bible. Nowhere you can see in the Bible there were 3 kings came.
The Protestant Bible?
That?
The Protestant Bible?
No. Nowhere in the Bible says there were 3 men.
What's with that picture in my granddaughter's picture Bible?
Only thing is that Bible says they offered 3 gifts to Jesus.
So that's how they...
And they offered 3 gifts: gold, frankincense, and myrrh. So they offered 3 gifts, and we concluded there were only 3 wise men.
Yeah.
If they were kings, and they were not, I don't think they were not kings. They were wise men. If they were kings, not the 3 alone, might have come, with, big caravans, no?
You know, when we were doing the Old Testament study, and especially with Exodus and everything like that, one of the hardest things to overcome is what I call the Cecil B. DeMille effect. The Hollywood, you know, we have these images
Yes.
emblazoned in our mind, and they're actually summaries. Summary pictures, you know, and it's not exactly, you know, it shows Moses coming up there in the Red Sea.
Yes.
But the Bible says the wind blew all night long, and not just when Moses got there. You know, so yet we have these images created from the movies.
And we really, you know, we want to have always this kind of dramatic things, you know, and we like it. Our mind is like that. Yes. So these three people, the names, you know, were given, of course, very late. You know, Balthasar, then Caspar, Balthasar, and one more, Melchior, Caspar, and Balthasar. So these are, you know, such simple traditions. You know, go on. Somebody named it. That's all. Somebody named it, and this one. For example, in Matthew's Gospel, we don't see the shepherds, you know, no shepherds coming. We don't see any angel coming and announcing it. We don't see even a manger. Nothing.
You have chapter 2, and you have the visit of the Magi, and then you're going to Egypt.
They are going they are fleeing to Egypt then. Matthew's Gospel is like that. Whatever, you know, the crib, that's all from Matthew, from Luke. It was only the Luke who gives all these things.
I was watching a documentary about the style of living in this area, and the homes traditionally were built on two levels. The upper level was for the living quarters, and the lower level was for the family. And they said in Greek, what is translated as the inn can also be translated as the upper level. So there was no room in the upper level, and they had to go to the manger. Now, what's really interesting about that picture, this is where the family was. There was no room amongst his family. So he was rejected by his own, you know, kind of cast down from his own people. You know, it just creates a whole different
perspective.
perspective on it. You know.
So, just, you know, I was just talking about these things, sir, you know, we take it for granted many things, you know. Yeah, when we speak about Christmas and things like that, you know, we take it for granted, everything is there. No. Mainly about Christmas, you know, what we see, Jesus' birth, you know, just in a very, very dry manner, no? Matthew puts in a very dry manner. There is no dramatization as Luke does.
One other thing, in Luke's genealogy of Jesus, it ends with son of Enos, son of Seth, the son of Adam, the son of God. So is this kind of a way to get beyond that argument with Joseph that actually Abraham's line comes with the creation of man, and Jesus was created by God, so they have the same father?
You know, Luke's understanding was, you know, very clear. It was very clear. He has written it for the Gentiles who did not have any connection with Jewish people, Jewish traditions, Jewish laws. So, connecting with Abraham has nothing to do with understanding. No? Who is Abraham? Abraham for a non-Jew.
Very good. Nothing.
So for them Jesus is the promised Messiah by God, no? So he comes from God.
From Adam.
From Adam. So, and not only that, Luke's gospel is a universal thing. That means he is for everyone.
Humanity.
For humanity, not for Jews.
All the one.
So that's why he comes from Adam. That means, you know, Adam is the father of the humanity. And therefore he comes from there. So it's very clear. And there are many occasions in which, Jesus very clearly speaks about. He picks up these things very clearly and put it there as a, in order to show the universality of Jesus' message. While Matthew very clearly restricts it to the Jews. Unless we have that idea in our mind, reading of the gospel, we don't get real, the meaning of it. Why Matthew puts this one? Let us see, when we are going, further, and then we will see it. So, okay, then let us see. Okay, did you get that? The first unit is, we have seen from chapter 3 to 7, including. Then comes the next session. Next section. 8 through 10. 11:1, 11:1, there is a problem. The second session, we will see that. So, 8, the second section unit is from 8 to 11. But 11 we don't include only one verse. See, we have that because the summary statement is, let us take chapter 11 first. Chapter 11, just to see that. The first verse, what's it?
When Jesus has
Finished. Look, when Jesus finished these things, that forms the second part.
Oh, that's the key.
That's the key. The second session ends with that.
I lost the key. What is it in with, Father?
Oh, you lost the key. Maybe you can find it in the hallway. So that is
Jesus finished.
We have, the Gospel of Matthew could be divided into 5 sections. Each section has a key to understand. That is what we call the summary statement. And the summary statements start like this. When Jesus finished these things. So the first one we see, the first unit ends, the summary statement we see, chapter 7, verse 28. The second section ends, chapter 11, first, verse 1. So let us take the second one, okay? The narrative part, as usual, narrative part, discourse and summary, okay? Here comes chapter 10 is the most important one. Chapter 10. That is the discourse, teaching. So the narrative part is chapter 8 and 9. The chapter 10 is discourse and 11:1 is the summary statement. That is that key to the second section. That is when Jesus finished these things. With that we see very clear. And this second chapter, we can, the second section, the discourse. Here it is, the Sermon on the Mount, 5 to 7, sermon, that is the name. Here we can see what's called instruction to disciple, what is that? The instruction to missionary instruction. A missionary instruction.
Father, what this course is really make clear is that God really came down from heaven to teach us here on earth, just literally take us by the hand to learn what we had to do here on earth. It's amazing how God can come down from heaven to come and teach us what to do here on earth.
Yeah. So the second section, the major discourse is chapter 10, and which we can call a missionary instruction. Let us take chapter 10. That's very, very clear. Chapter 10. So for example, there is a missionary instruction. Missionary instruction, what do you mean by that? How a missionary should live, what are the things he is going to get, what are the rewards, what are the problems he is going to face, all those things are discussed, or Jesus saying in the 10th chapter. What we call that is the discourse, no? The second sessions, the core part of the second section is the chapter 10, and which is a missionary discourse, a missionary instruction. So, for example, let's see, he, takes 12, call his 12 apostles and then, give. The mission of the 12, what they should do. He sent them. Then so for them, the persecution is waiting. And they have to fear no one. You go and preach. Then, if somebody rejects Jesus, what is going to happen to him? Then, see, not peace but sword. When his message is gone, it doesn't, bring peace, but sometimes it's sword. That means, difficulties and problems. And at the end, what are the rewards they are going to get for a missionary for Jesus? So, these are the chapter 10. Okay, we have to see before that. There are chapter 8 and 9. Who is calling? Just a moment.
So what did you say about 8 and 9, Father? Is that the narrative? Narrative, because they describe things.
Yeah, they just describe things. So in chapter 8 and 9, we see there are 9 miracles are described. 9 miracles. And mostly it is healing miracles. Healing miracles. Now, let us see. Chapter 8. Take Bible in chapter 8. The first one, Jesus heals a man, no?
Leper.
He's a cleansing of the leper, no? It's a healing of the leper. Then Jesus heals a Roman officer's servant. No? Jesus, the Roman officer's servant. Then Jesus heals many people. 14 onwards. Then he calms the storm in the sea. Then heals 2 men with demons, no? Again, Jesus healed the paralytic. 9. Jesus then there are then the calls Matthew and fasting. Okay, that is new part. And then the officer's daughter. No, then the woman with hemorrhage. What is that? No. Jesus heals 2 blind men. Jesus heals a man who could not speak. And see, if you count, there are 9 miracles reported already. And that part is chapter 8 and 9 is mostly it's a collection of miracles. And mostly healing miracles. So remember chapter, at least 5, 6, 7, Sermon on the Mount. It's very easy. Teaching section. 8 and 7, 8 and 7, 7 and 8, 8, 9, what we call, here. The narrative part, or at least the 8 and 9 chapters, 8 and 9, what we call, or the miracles. 10, again, instruction. At least This is for our, this is narrative part, discourse part. This is for a structure for us, for us to understand and assimilate. That's not for the people to say. This is for our study purpose. What we see is, for example, understand like this, okay, chapter 5, 6 and 7, Sermon on the Mount. Now, it's very easy to remember for you. Chapter 8 and 9, miracles of healings mostly. Miracles. And very easy. Okay, where do we find the miracle? Okay, it's very easy if you know something, some clue about that. Oh, the miracles are mostly in the chapter 8 and 9. Okay, take it. Chapter 8 and 9, you have there. Sermon on the Mount, we all know. 5, 6 and 7. 8 and 9, miracles. 10, again, to our structured discourse. And 11, verse first, is the summary statement. Yes. You got the second section, okay? Now, let us take, we shall try to finish it, I think it's already time. So, I don't know whether we will be able to. This is the way, how it is structured. Let us see, there are 3 more sections more to go. I don't think so, we will be able to finish it because it is almost, it's 7 o'clock now. 8 o'clock. So we'll continue next time onwards, no? Do you feel that, it's going to be a little, helpful for us to learn more about Bible? If you have, any other suggestions, please let me know. So please.